7 wonders. 1 survived. The other 6? Gone. Completely. Like they never existed. No ruins you can visit, no pieces behind museum glass, just nothing. These weren't small buildings. They were the most jaw-dropping structures humans had ever built. Statues taller than 10-story apartment blocks, gardens growing in the middle of a desert, a lighthouse so powerful its light reached 50 kilometers out to sea, and somehow, all of it vanished. We're going to find out exactly how, because the way each one died tells you something about the world that built it, and something about us. Here's what most people don't think about when they imagine the ancient world. No cranes, no steel, no electricity, no GPS, no blueprints printed on demand. Every single one of these wonders was built by people using their hands, ropes, ramps, and raw problem solving. They spent decades, sometimes lifetimes, on a single project. So when a wonder fell, it wasn't just a building coming down, it was generations of work, knowledge, and belief wiped out in a single moment. The question isn't just how they disappear. That's why nobody could stop it. Let's start at the beginning. Chapter 1. The Colossus of Rhodes. It starts with a war that Rhodes almost lost. In 305 BC, a military commander named Demetrius the Besieger showed up at the island's coast with one of the most terrifying war machines ever built. It was called the Helepolis, the Taker of Cities, a rolling iron tower on wheels, bristling with catapults, built to crush whatever stood in front of it. For a full year, the people of Rhodes held on. They fought, they rationed, they pushed back, and eventually, Demetrius gave up. He packed his fleet and left. But here's the thing. He abandoned everything. His siege towers, his weapons, his equipment. All of it, sitting on the beach. The Rhodians didn't just scrap it for parts. They auctioned the whole lot, made a fortune, and with that money, they commissioned something the world had never seen. A statue. Not a small statue. The biggest statue ever built. They hired a sculptor named Chares and told him, "Make us a monument to Helios, the sun god." They started by asking for an 18-meter figure. Then they doubled the ask. Chares agreed, probably without doing the math, because doubling the height of a statue doesn't double the materials, it multiplies them by 8. Construction started in 292 BC. It took 12 years. Chares built a massive earthen ramp around the statue as it grew. Workers stacked bronze sheets over an iron and stone skeleton, section by section, meter by meter. When the ramp was finally cleared away, there it stood, 33 meters of bronze, gleaming in the sun, visible from miles out at sea. Sailors would have seen it long before they saw the island. Then, 66 years later, the ground moved. A powerful earthquake hit Rhodes in 226 BC. The iron joints inside the statue's knees buckled. The whole thing snapped at the legs and collapsed in on itself, crushing buildings beneath it as it fell. Just like that, gone. Or so you'd think. For almost 800 years, the Colossus lay where it fell, broken, face down on the shore. Tourists would come from across the ancient world just to stare at the ruins. Pliny the Elder wrote that you couldn't wrap both arms around its thumb. That's how big it was, even lying on the ground in pieces. Then came 653 AD. Arab forces took the island. Their commander, Muawiyah, looked at the ruins and saw scrap metal. His men cut the bronze apart and loaded it onto camels. 900 camels. That's how much bronze there was. It was sold to a merchant, melted down, turned into coins or weapons. No one knows exactly what. Today you can visit Rhodes and see 2 columns at the entrance to the harbor, each topped with a bronze deer. That's it. That's all that's left of the most celebrated statue of the ancient world. Not a single fragment, not one piece of bronze. Nothing. Chapter 2. The Lighthouse of Alexandria. If the Colossus was a symbol of victory, the Lighthouse of Alexandria was something different. It was pure, unapologetic engineering genius. And it worked. For 1,500 years. Construction started around 285 BC, ordered by Ptolemy I, one of Alexander the Great's generals, who carved out Egypt as his kingdom after Alexander died. The architect was a man named Sostratus of Cnidus. Here's where it gets interesting. Ptolemy told Sostratus he wasn't allowed to put his name on the building. The glory belonged to the king. Sostratus smiled, nodded, and then chiseled his own name into the stone of the foundation. He covered it with plaster and wrote the king's name on top. Decades passed. The plaster crumbled in the sea air, and the world learned who actually built it. The lighthouse itself was extraordinary. Over 120 meters tall, 3 tiers. The bottom was square and housed soldiers and workers. The middle was octagonal, covered in bronze statues. The top was cylindrical, and at its peak burned a fire so intense its light could be seen 50 kilometers out to sea. They achieved that with a system of polished bronze mirrors, angled, calibrated, focused, like a spotlight before spotlights existed. During the day, a column of thick smoke served as the beacon. Ships from across the Mediterranean used it to navigate safely into Alexandria, one of the richest ports in the ancient world. To keep the fire burning, they needed tons of wood every day. They hauled it up the inside of the tower on donkeys along a wide spiral ramp. The whole operation never stopped. This lighthouse outlived empires. It watched Roman legions march in. It survived Arab conquest. It kept burning. Then in 796 AD, an earthquake hit hard enough to destroy the top section. The mirrors, the fire system, gone. The lighthouse became a watchtower. Then Arab rulers tried to rebuild it. They put a mosque dome on top. Then a story started circulating. One of the most consequential pieces of gossip in architectural history. A Byzantine spy allegedly got close to the local caliph, convinced him that Alexander the Great's legendary treasure was buried directly beneath the lighthouse's foundation. The caliph ordered demolition to start immediately. Workers ripped off the bronze mirrors, tore down upper sections, and then the lie was exposed. Or maybe it was just incompetence catching up to them. Either way, the damage was done. 2 more earthquakes finished the job. One in 1303, another in 1323. The lighthouse came apart in stages like a tower of blocks being knocked over in slow motion. By 1349, the traveler Ibn Battuta visited Alexandria and wrote in his journal that you couldn't even get through the entrance anymore. The rubble was that bad. In 1477, Sultan Qaitbay built a fortress on what was left of the foundation. His builders used the lighthouse's own stone blocks to construct the walls. The lighthouse didn't just fall, it got absorbed, eaten alive by the very city it once protected. The fort still stands today. You can visit it, and if you look closely at the walls, some of those stones are original. The lighthouse is literally part of the fortress now. In 1994, French divers found hundreds of ancient statue fragments and stone blocks on the harbor floor, blocks weighing up to 70 tons, sitting in the silt, undisturbed for centuries. That's all that's left of the lighthouse, a fort on top of its grave, and chunks of stone on the bottom of the sea. Chapter 3. The Hanging Gardens of Babylon. This one is different from every other wonder on the list, because we're not even sure it existed. No ancient Babylonian text ever mentions it. No excavation has turned up definitive proof. Every description we have comes from Greek writers, people who weren't there, writing about something they'd heard of secondhand. But the description is so detailed, so specific, so technically consistent, that something must have inspired it. Here's what the legend says. Around the 6th century BC, the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar II built the gardens for his wife, Amytis. She came from Media, a land of mountains, forests, and rivers. Babylon was flat, hot, dusty. She missed home. So her husband built her a mountain. The gardens were a 4-tiered pyramid. Each level was a terrace, connected by wide stone stairways. The base of every level was massive stone slabs covered with reed mats, sealed with asphalt, lined with double brick, then topped with lead sheets so the water wouldn't seep through and rot the structure below. Only after all that came a thick layer of fertile soil, deep enough for full-grown trees to take root. From a distance, the whole thing looked like trees floating in the sky. The engineering challenge was water. Babylon was in a desert. Plants need constant watering, huge amounts of it, every single day, so they built a machine. Inside one of the structure's columns, they ran a continuous chain of leather buckets on a wheel, turned by slaves, that pulled water up from the Euphrates River to the top tier. From there, it flowed down through artificial streams and waterfalls. Gravity did the rest. This was the first large-scale vertical irrigation system ever built. In the 6th century BC, the gardens flourished for about 200 years. When Alexander the Great captured Babylon in 331 BC, he was reportedly stunned by what he saw. He made the city his capital. It's said he spent his final days resting in the shade of those gardens, surrounded by plants brought from dozens of countries he'd conquered. Then Alexander died, and so did everything that kept the gardens alive. Without constant maintenance, the hydraulic system failed. The water stopped, the trees dried out. The roots that had been holding the soil together died. The earth started crumbling. Floods came and undermined the mud brick foundations. And unlike Egypt's stone pyramids, Babylon was built in clay. Clay without water isn't a building, it's a sandcastle. By the 1st century AD, Roman historians were describing ruins. By the Middle Ages, sand. In the 20th century, archaeologist Robert Koldewey thought he'd found the gardens. He uncovered an unusual foundation in Babylon. A deep well, complex canals. He was convinced. Modern researchers disagree. They think the gardens were actually in Nineveh, built by the Assyrian king Sennacherib, and that Greek historians mixed up the two cities, the two kings, the two stories. That would explain why Babylon's own records, meticulous, obsessive records, never once mention them. Either way, the gardens are gone. No wall, no artifact, no tree stump, nothing. Just sand, excavation trenches, and a legend about a king who tried to move a mountain for the woman he loved. Chapter 4. The Temple of Artemis at Ephesus. This one burned down, on purpose. The Temple of Artemis at Ephesus wasn't just a place of worship. It was enormous. 127 marble columns, each 18 meters tall. It was a sanctuary, meaning anyone inside its walls was legally untouchable. It was a bank. It was an art gallery. It was the most magnificent building in the Greek world. Construction started around 550 BC, funded by the Lydian king Croesus, a man so legendarily rich his name became a phrase. The architects, Chersiphron and his son Metagenes, had a problem. The region was earthquake-prone. Stone buildings crumbled. So they did something counterintuitive. They built a marsh. The soft, wet ground would absorb shockwaves, like building on a mattress instead of concrete. They dug a massive foundation pit and filled it with charcoal and sheep's wool as a base layer. Then came the marble. It worked. For about 200 years, the temple stood untouched. Then came July 21st, 356 BC. A man named Herostratus broke in at night. He wanted to be famous. That was it. No political motive, no religious grievance. He just wanted people to know his name forever. So he set the roof timbers on fire. The temple burned from the inside out. Marble cracks under extreme heat. Columns snapped. The roof collapsed. By morning, centuries of construction were rubble. The people of Ephesus were furious. They executed Herostratus and passed a law forbidding anyone from ever speaking his name again. The penalty? Death. It didn't work. His name survived. Yours probably hasn't stuck with you the same way it has with his, and you're watching a video about him right now. There's a legend attached to this night. On the same night the temple burned, Alexander the Great was born in Macedonia. Ancient writers called it fate, that the goddess Artemis was too busy attending the birth of the future world conqueror to save her own house. Alexander later offered to pay for the whole reconstruction. Every coin, no expense, spared. His condition, his name had to appear on the front of the building. The people of Ephesus declined, diplomatically. They told him it wouldn't be right for one god to dedicate a temple to another god. The temple was rebuilt with public money. It was finished by 323 BC. It was even more magnificent than the original, and it survived, through Roman conquest, through centuries of use, for another 600 years. Then came 263 AD Gothic tribes raided Ephesus. They ransacked the treasury, gutted the interior, left the structure badly damaged. Then Emperor Theodosius I signed the Edict of 391 AD, banning all pagan worship. The temple was officially closed, then stripped. Marble slabs went to Constantinople for the Hagia Sophia. Columns were burned for lime. The marsh that saved the temple from earthquakes, it became its tomb. Centuries of river silt buried the foundations. By the 1800s, nothing was visible, just a muddy field. In 1869, British archaeologist John Wood spent years searching before finding the foundation 6 meters underground. Today, one column, reconstructed. Storks nest at the top, that's it. One column in a boggy field, where the greatest building in the Greek world once stood. Chapter 5. The Mausoleum at Halicarnassus. This one was built for love, or for ego, maybe both. In 353 BC, the ruler of a region in modern-day Turkey named Mausolus died. But here's the thing. Mausolus had been planning his own tomb while he was still alive. He wanted it to be the most beautiful structure ever built. Something that would outlast every temple, every palace, every other monument on Earth. His widow, Queen Artemisia, took over the project after he died. By all accounts, she was devoted to his memory in an almost obsessive way. She didn't stop building. She brought in the best Greek architects and sculptors alive. She spent everything. The result was unlike anything the ancient world had seen. 45 meters tall, a massive marble pedestal for a base. On top of that, a Greek temple with 36 columns. On top of that, a step pyramid and crowning. The whole thing? A marble chariot pulled by 4 horses with statues of Mausolus and Artemisia riding inside, looking out over the city that would carry his name forever. The word mausoleum, that came from him. Every grand tomb in history has carried his name ever since. The structure lasted nearly 1,000 years. It survived Alexander the Great. It survived Rome. It survived the Byzantine era. In the 10th century, earthquakes, a series of them. The columns fell. The pyramid roof caved in. What had stood for a millennium became a pile of rubble. It sat that way for 200 years. Then in 1404, the Knights of St. John arrived. They needed to reinforce their nearby castle against Ottoman forces. They looked at the ruins of the mausoleum and thought, free building materials. They stripped it, used the stone for their fortress walls. While working inside the ruins, they reportedly found a hidden burial chamber, a sarcophagus of extraordinary craftsmanship, gold decorations still intact. They decided to open it the next morning. When they came back, the chamber had been raided. Pirates had beaten them to it. Overnight. The knights shrugged and kept stripping the walls. By the 19th century, only a pit remained where the mausoleum had stood. British archaeologists excavated what was left. Today, carved friezes and fragments of the marble chariot sit in the British Museum in London. On the actual site in modern Bodrum, Turkey, you'll find an empty lot. A few broken column stumps. That's all that's left of a structure that lasted 1,000 years and gave us a word we still use today. Chapter 6. The statue of Zeus at Olympia. Of all the wonders, this one was the most sacred, and perhaps the most beautiful. Around 435 BC, the sculptor Phidias finished work on a statue of Zeus, the king of the Greek gods, inside the temple at Olympia, the same Olympia where the games were held. This was the centerpiece of the whole site. Zeus sat on a cedar throne encrusted with precious stones. The statue was 15 meters tall. If the god had stood up, he would have punched through the ceiling. Phidias used a technique called chryselephantine. The frame was wood, but every exposed part of Zeus's skin was covered in polished ivory. His robes? Solid gold. His sandals? Gold. His eyes were carved from precious gems. Pilgrims who walked through the temple doors reportedly stopped in their tracks. Just frozen, speechless. There's a story that when Phidias finished, someone asked him, "Did you actually see Zeus before you made this?" He said he just followed Homer's descriptions of the god from the Iliad and the Odyssey. Then, the story goes, he asked Zeus directly for a sign of approval, and lightning struck the black marble floor, right in front of the statue. The priests took that as a yes. To maintain the statue, they anointed it regularly with olive oil. The ivory would crack without moisture. They also kept a shallow oil pool in front of the throne, and when sunlight came through the temple doors and hit that pool, the reflection made the statue appear to glow. It was designed to look like a god was radiating light. For nearly 800 years it worked. Pilgrims came, offerings were made. Even Roman emperors treated it with reverence. Well, most of them. Emperor Caligula reportedly tried to have the head removed so his own face could be attached. According to the legend, the moment workers approached the statue, it let out a thunderous laugh. The scaffolding collapsed. The workers ran screaming. Caligula dropped the project. Then 391 AD came. Emperor Theodosius I banned the Olympics, closed all pagan temples. The sanctuary was abandoned. Looters moved in. The gold and gems were stripped from the statue piece by piece. Around 416 AD, someone decided to save what was left. The statue was carefully dismantled and transported to Constantinople, to the private mansion of a powerful official named Lausus, who collected ancient art. It sat there for decades. Then, in 475 AD, a fire broke out in Constantinople. It spread fast. Lausus's palace burned completely. The wooden frame of Zeus ignited. The gold melted into the ash. The ivory turned to powder. The greatest religious statue in the ancient world was gone in hours. Today you can visit Olympia. You'll see rows of fallen columns on the ground, like dominoes that never got picked up. And at the nearby museum, you can see the workshop where Phidias actually built the statue. Archaeologists found it, still with tools inside. The workshop survived. The statue didn't. 6 wonders, 6 different endings. One was toppled by an earthquake and melted into weapons. One was swallowed by a medieval fortress. One might not have even existed. One was burned by a man who just wanted to be remembered. One was quarried for building materials over centuries. One burned in a house fire. None of them survived because they were too complicated, too expensive to maintain, too easy to exploit once the civilization that built them started to fade. And then there's the seventh wonder, the Great Pyramid of Giza, the one that's still standing. Why did it survive when nothing else did? Because it's a mountain. 2.3 million stone blocks, nothing to burn, nothing to melt, nothing to collapse. You can chip at it for 1,000 years and still barely make a dent. The pyramid survived because it's fundamentally brutally simple. Everything else, the beauty, the complexity, the gold, the bronze, the intricate machinery, all of it became a weakness the moment no one was left to protect it. That's the real lesson here. The things that last aren't always the most beautiful. They're the ones built to outlast neglect, greed, and time, the ones that don't need anyone to keep them alive. The wonders of the world weren't just destroyed by earthquakes and armies. They were destroyed by the simple fact that civilizations don't last forever, and when the people who cared about them were gone. So were they. Today, archaeologists are still digging, still finding fragments, still trying to understand what these places actually looked like. Because in 2,000 years of loss, we still haven't stopped looking. Maybe that says something about us too.